So we're back at reading Abe Lincoln at last, and I thought we were on our last chapter, but there's actually 2 chapters left. So I'm going to go ahead and read both of them tonight. So there's no more waiting. We figure out what happens. Chapter 11 is called Abe Lincoln at Last, and here it goes. Jack and Annie looked around in a daze. They were under the trees, near the treehouse, standing in the same spot where they'd sipped the potion. The air was chilly but bright. A fresh breeze rustled the branches. The magic ended, said Jack, stunned. It ended before we could complete our mission. I know, said Annie, and we didn't get to say goodbye to Sam. I didn't even get to thank him for the quill pen and the ink, said Jack. I know, these were his treasures, said Annie. She held up the goose feather and the ink jar that Sam had given them. Wait, that's so weird, said Jack. We're looking for a feather and Sam gave us a pen made out of a feather. Annie gasped. Look, Jack, she pointed toward the carriageway. A tall man in a dark coat and a high black hat was striding toward the grove of trees. He turned his head as if he were searching for something. At last, said Jack. Mr. President, Annie called. She thrust the quill pen and the ink bottle back into her pocket and ran toward Abraham Lincoln. Wait, said Jack, running after her. What'll we say? We'll figure it out, said Annie. Mr. President! Abraham Lincoln turned and looked in their direction. He froze and stared at them, as if he were both astonished and afraid. There he is. And there's Jack and Annie. What's wrong with him? Thought Jack. As they got closer to the president, Jack and Annie slowed to a walk. Abraham Lincoln kept staring at them as if they were ghosts. Hello, sir, Annie said shyly. Jack was speechless. The creases in the president's face gave him a deeply worried look. His gray eyes stared at them without blinking. So it is you, he said in a hushed voice. Tad told me your names, but I could not believe it might really be you. What do you mean? Annie asked. You don't know who I am? He said. You're Abraham Lincoln, said Annie, President of the United States. Yes, but I spent the day with you once long ago, said the president, and you vanished right before my eyes. We did? Said Annie. Outside our log cabin in Indiana, said the president. Indiana, said Jack. Yes, it was the day my father brought my stepmother home and my new sisters and brother. Oh, said Annie. What? Said Jack. You were Sam, said Annie. You were Sam? Said Jack. He couldn't believe it. The president nodded. Annie laughed. So when we told you we were looking for Abraham Lincoln, you played a prank on us and told us your name was Sam? Abraham Lincoln smiled. I haven't seen you since that day so long ago, he said, and you haven't changed at all. I don't understand. Are you angels? Are you a dream? Jack was too stunned to answer. It wasn't long ago, it was today, he thought. Or maybe not. Time and magic were confusing things. We're just regular kids, not angels, said Annie. But maybe you should think of it all as a dream with a little magic thrown in. Abraham Lincoln nodded slowly, then he smiled. I remember you tried to do my chores, he said, and you thought some wild creature was chasing you and told me that your interjections were oh wow and oh man. Right, said Jack, smiling. You also said you loved learning and you loved to read and you loved to write stories, said the president. And you said you loved to do that too, said Annie. So you gave us these. She pulled out the ink bottle and the quill pen out of her apron pocket. These were yours once, remember? Abraham Lincoln stared at the ink bottle and feather pen. "Yes," he said, "I made them from blackberry roots and a goose feather." "Oh, man," whispered Jack. For the first time, it fully dawned on him that Sam, who was really Abraham Lincoln, had given them a feather. The rhyme was starting to make perfect sense. "Why have you come back?" asked the president. Now Jack knew exactly what to say. "We have to give you a message of hope," he answered. He reached for the notebook in his pocket. "Jack's right," said Annie. "Just a second." She opened the ink bottle and dipped the goose feather pen into the ink. Then she handed the pen to Jack. "What should we say?" she whispered. "Well, the Civil War is going to have a good ending," Jack whispered back. All the country will come together, sorry. "With freedom for everybody," whispered Annie. "I'll write something about all that," said Jack. He thought for a second, and using the goose feather pen, he scratched a message on a page in his notebook. "Never lose hope. This land will live peacefully as one nation one day, with freedom for everyone." "You told us to use your quill, pen, and blackberry ink to write something special," Jack said. He tore up the page and handed it to the President of the United States. "This is it." Abraham Lincoln read the words on the paper. When he looked at Jack and Annie, the creases in his face had softened. His eyes had grown bright. "Oh, wow," he said softly. Jack and Annie laughed. "Do you really think so?" the president asked. "Do you promise?" "Yes, I need to add something," said Jack. He took the note back from the president and wrote, "We give you our word, Jack and Annie." A shout came from the distance. "Pa! Pa!" It was Tad. He was running up the carriageway with Willie right behind him. "Mr. President, we have to leave now," said Jack. "Really?" said Abraham Lincoln. He looked sad for a moment. Then he looked at his boys running toward him. "Yes, of course, I understand," he said. "We'll never forget our times with you, Sam," said Annie. "Nor will I forget," said Abraham Lincoln. The boys were getting closer. "Here, sir," said Jack. He gave the note back to the president. Then he and Annie started moving away. "Goodbye," they called to Abraham Lincoln. The president waved and put their note in his pocket. Then Jack and Annie quickly climbed up the ladder. Inside the tree house, they looked out the window. They saw Abraham Lincoln hurrying to meet his boys. When he caught up to them, he wrapped his arm around them both. They were all laughing. "Abraham Lincoln's a good dad," said Annie. "Yeah," said Jack, smiling. "Well, we'd better go now before Tad tries to take the treehouse away from us." Annie laughed. "He'll be pretty surprised when he discovers it's disappeared," she said. She picked up the Pennsylvania book and pointed to a picture of the Frog Creek woods. "I wish we could go home," she said. The wind began to blow. The treehouse started to spin. It spun faster and faster. Then everything was still, absolutely still. So that's the end of chapter 11. And chapter 12 is the last chapter. It's only a couple of pages, so here we go. The Feather of Hope. A spring breeze was whispering through the trees. "We're home," said Jack. They were back in Frog Creek, wearing their own clothes again. Jack looked at in his backpack and pulled out their book on Abraham Lincoln. Annie reached into one of her jacket pockets. "Good, they're still here," she said. She took out Abraham Lincoln's gifts, a bottle of blackberry ink and the goose feather pen. "Cool," said Jack. "Before we go, I want to look in our book and see if there's a picture of Willie and Tad," said Annie. She took the book from Jack and checked the index. Yes! Then she turned to a page on the Lincoln children. Annie read for a moment. Then she whispered a sad, "Oh no." She closed the book and put it down. She looked terribly sad. "What's wrong? What did you read?" said Jack. I just read that Willie died of typhoid fever in 1862, said Annie. Oh no, said Jack. That was a year after we met him. Poor Abraham Lincoln, said Annie. Poor Tad, said Jack. Yeah, he really needed Willie, said Annie. And then Tad will lose his dad just 4 years later, said Jack. President Lincoln will get assassinated. I know, said Annie softly. Jack didn't know what to say. He felt like the wind had been knocked out of him. All his annoyance at Tad disappeared. He wished he'd been kinder to him. It doesn't make sense, does it? Said Annie. I guess that's why hope is such an important thing, Jack said. What do you mean? Said Annie. We can't explain why sad things happen, Jack said. All we can do is hope they make sense someday. Like when? Said Annie. When will they make sense? I don't know when, said Jack. Maybe not even in a person's lifetime. Maybe in a world beyond this world, he sighed. Maybe we just have to accept that it's a mystery. Annie nodded, blinking back tears. Well, we brought back the feather of hope, she said. And we gave hope to Abraham Lincoln, said Jack. And he did really great things as a president, didn't he? Annie said. Yeah, and he was a great dad, too, said Jack. Jack placed the feather of hope in the corner of the treehouse next to the glacial buttercup and the emerald rose. There's one more thing to get to save Penny, said Annie. Tomorrow, said Jack. Definitely, said Annie. Today, I just want to live my normal life, have breakfast with Mom and Dad. And go to school, added Jack. We're lucky we can go to school, said Annie. Yeah, said Jack. And we're lucky to have a nice house with heat and running water. And comfortable beds, said Annie. She started down the rope ladder. And lots of books, said Jack. He grabbed his backpack and climbed down after her. As Jack and Annie headed home between the trees, a breeze shook the wet branches. Sparkling raindrops filled the Frog Creek woods. And that is it. That's the